It is so good to be with you, Krzysztof. It is my pleasure to be with you and spend a few moments talking about your incredible film, March 1968. I'm Rabbi Geri Newburge. I am honored to serve Mainline Reform Temple in Wynwood, Pennsylvania, and so grateful to PJFM for showing this really important and thoughtful film. So thanks for spending a few minutes with me. And I guess without any further ado, we can dive into some questions unless you have a few opening remarks you want to share with us.
Welcome. Nice to meet you. And I'm really excited to answer your questions because I've never been to Philadelphia before. So at least I will hear someone from there.
Well, you'll have to come visit us and we will show you all of the sites. We have some important American history here, but obviously we're going to talk about a specific time period of history that you know quite a bit about, both from a personal perspective and also from your professional perspective. So first and foremost, thank you for making this movie. I learned a lot by watching it and doing a little bit of my own study in the course of viewing it. And I wanted to start with hopefully one question to think about the context that you're working out of, which is, how was this movie received in Poland when it premiered, I guess, last year in 2022?
It's been released during pandemic time, so I can only tell you what were the comments from the first reviews after the screenings, and it was well accepted. I mean, the film was shown in cinemas and also at the festivals in Poland, and I don't remember any bad comment from these screenings. You know, some of them were more enthusiastic, some of them were, let's say, good, but basically there was no they did not criticize the film. So this is so I can say in general it was well received in Poland.
Well, as it should be. So I'm very glad to hear that. And there was a little bit of a note at the end of the movie about a personal note from you to your classmates, who I assume was your class photo that was shown at the beginning and the end of the film, which was incredibly moving. How much of the movie was based on a true story? I know the historical events are an accurate portrayal. It seems to be an accurate portrayal, but how much of the personal story, I guess, was based on?
This film is my, among all my films I did in my life, this seems to be most personal because basically, I mean, the whole story is based on either characters I met, or this is my private story of my family, or I've heard something which came from the nearest neighborhood, so I can say that this is really a true story, and that's why I wanted this story to be well close to my life, I would say, because I had this subject in my head since at least 20 years, and just by chance it happened that I got an offer from Polish television that I can make this movie, and eventually I put everything I had in my head into this script. So the girl, Hania, she's well, so-called my sister, because two families was sacked from his post. He was a publisher, like in the film her mother is a publisher,
Right.
and they were forced to leave Poland. So that's basically her story. She was at that time she was a student of a different faculty at the university. Her boyfriend was an actor, so I knew all what was happening in the theater school from him. So actually, the song which starts the film is taken from the exam. So this is her. A boy, he looks like someone whom I met. He was a friend of mine whose father was a policeman. He worked as an officer in militia. And the story was a bit different, but basically, I mean, the atmosphere of his house, I knew from him. The rest of events shown on the movie, I witnessed simply because I was finishing high school in Warsaw in 68. This was my last year in high school, and it happened in March. So few months before we were finishing, and we were preparing ourselves for the exams to the university. And when the strikes started, we were running. All my classmates, we were running with our food, and Polytechnics was just opposite to my school. So we were throwing, the food to the students who were on strike. So as you see, everything happened. Either I witnessed in my own eyes, or I was told the stories, or so it went through me like a true life.
I think that really comes through in the movie because you do a beautiful job, I think, of capturing the emotions, both the joy of young people meeting and falling in love, and then facing the conflict in the world surrounding them. So I think that must come from a place of personal experience to be able to convey that. You mentioned Hannah, and so I was going to ask about, did you give her that name with any specific intention or reasoning, or you just like the name Hannah?
My granddaughter is Hannah.
Oh, that's the best reason.
Okay, no, I just simply like this name, and the original name of my sister, so-called sister, is Renata. So no connection, no any reference to the name, just simply because I like the name. And as I said, my granddaughter is also Hannah.
Sure.
That might be a reason.
So I was wondering a little bit about your thought process and creative direction for the film, because obviously there are scenes that are in black and white, and the majority of the film is in color, but it's an interesting juxtaposition when you choose to use the black and white and when you are using the color. So maybe you could say a few words about your thought process on that.
Sure. Sorry, I got a flu a bit. Before I started to make feature films, I was a documentary filmmaker and very much involved with the Polish history. And I was very often digging in the archives, watching footage from the past, and this footage I found regarding March 68 was extraordinary, because until 1989, it's been in the archives which were not available. Mm. And after 89, when the system has changed, the footage from the archive of internal police were open to the public, and I could see what was happening, because they were filming people like today every police does, that they want to recognize faces, So they were filming people during this revolt, and it was, for me, an extraordinary opportunity, because if I would like to arrange such a wide set like you see on this footage, I would spend millions of dollars, and that would be not enough. So this is kind of extension of the colored footage, that it gives you a flavor and an emotion what was happening around. It was really a big rebel in Warsaw. You could see, crowds just, I had only 400 extras at the university, but as a matter of fact, there were 3,000 students striking at that time. So just to extend, the image of this rebel, I was using this footage, and just to give you a flavor, because black and white, the whole film is a bit is done in a way like a paradocumentary. I'm not pretending to have, a very specific shots of the camera. If you would compare my other films, you would find for sure, more sophisticated shots. This time, I was trying to shoot this film as simple as possible, just to give a chance to the viewer that he's following events like they were in a rather modest way, I would say. So this was my aim to get the truth. Truth was for me the key word.
So I think in what you just described, by stripping it away from fancy camera work or sophisticated angles or what have you, it let the story come to the forefront. And the story doesn't need, I don't think, a lot of embellishment, because the story itself is so compelling, both the historical aspect of what took place in Warsaw in March of '68 and then the events that followed, as well as this beautiful love story between two young people, but also I think the love that's portrayed between parents and their children. So I think that in that sense, there was so much emotion built into your storytelling that maybe the other camera stuff wasn't quite as necessary. I'm sure there's a more proper technical term than stuff, but from a layperson's perspective, I think the story is just so moving and compelling historically and on a personal note.
Yeah, I mean, when I got an offer, I rang my friend who's a scriptwriter. We working together, and we were sure that we want to prepare the film for the youngsters, because they don't know the history which happened at that time. So and we took Shakespeare's structures. That's Romeo and Juliet. It's always a good story. So this time it matched to our story perfectly. So two different families, not Capuletti, not Montecchi, but this time were Polish families.
Yes,
And
for sure.
one was antisemitic, the other one was just, and also I was trying to break, the image of I mean, the image of the Jew in Poland, it's always he has a dark hair, someone. This time I just made it opposite, because we know that that genes are genes, and of course it sometimes Jews are blonde hair very often.
Sure. Can you speak a little bit? I think you hinted at this earlier. Speak a little bit to your musical choices that you used throughout the movie. I thought that lent itself very well to what was happening in that moment of the film.
Yeah,
So,
the music, I knew that music is very important in the movie, and I'm the guy who was composer, who is a composer, Bartek Gliniak. He stays in he stays in the States. He lives he lived at that time in LA. Now he lives in Phoenix. But when I was trying to make a brief for him, I said to him, listen, I don't think, I mean, jazz would be too obvious, I said. perhaps we try to avoid jazz and we try to go somewhere else. And in the end of the day, he started to send me fragments of music, but I was not happy with that. And one day I remember I came to cutting room and I brought with me, the stuff from Miles Davis, from the famous stuff from the film. What is what called? They have recorded this music for the film in Paris. Anyway, Miles Davis matched perfectly. So I said to Bartek, listen, this is your reference. Please, let's go. I don't need music, I need ambient. And it took us 7 months.
Wow.
Bit by bit, piece by piece. Sometimes there were layers of the music, which I was splitting. And so it was a very, very complicated work, I must say. You don't even feel it, but I guess that subconsciously somehow it works.
Yeah, I certainly think it does. But it's fascinating that it took 7 months just for the music. So I guess from when you spent your first day on this project until you finished editing and you had the final movie as you wanted it, how long did that entire process take you?
We started the shoot on March 19th, 2 years ago. And we were ready. The last day of shoot was June 6th, I remember. And the film had a premiere in March last year. So actually it took 1 year to get to the premiere. Maybe less, but they kept this film just to have a good, to release film during holidays. It's not, and we had pandemic at that time, so it was a bit more complicated. Anyway, roughly a year.
Okay. There's the scene where we start to see the protests at the university and the police trying to break the protests and sort of the underhand of the government working at the same time. But in that moment when the protests seem to start, many of the young women are carrying these red flowers. And so I wanted to ask you both about, I think, the historical piece of that and also what that red flower represents to you.
This is, well, it's difficult to explain you because you're Americans, but in Poland, which was a communist country at that time, March 8th was a Women's Day officially. It was a state Women's Day. And in many offices, there was official presents for women, this kind of flower, exactly, this kind, plus stockings. So those two things were given to ladies in Poland in communist time, and this was like for years. It lasted years. It was a kind of habit which lasted until the end of communist time, I think, and this refers to what was happening. I mean, of course, they have distance to it, but they pretend to be official. So that's why. But basically, I also I am buying when some of my friends, they postpone now Ladies' Day, but I don't. I'm giving always flowers to my ladies on March 8th.
Well, that is a lovely tradition, as I'm sure you know. March 8th, I believe, is International Women's Day. So it's a beautiful tradition to carry on. For the flowers, I think we could all do without the stockings. So, um, well, it was an interesting I think, juxtaposition to the violence that ensues on that day. So there's both this celebration of women and seemingly of love, but then you have this horrific unfolding of events where people are being brutalized and taken into custody and what have you. And so it presents a pretty stark reality.
Yes, behind this date, there is a story because can be told, because the first date of this strike was fixed a couple days before March 8th. But someone, I mean, there were people, because the strike was organized because they had expelled two students of Jewish origin, one Adam Michnik, a known person. Now he's a very known person. He's a friend of mine, and also another Hendrik Schleifer. And this was one of the reasons. The second reason was this play which has been closed in the theater. And when they were trying to organize this strike against this against authorities at the university, they thought it could be on March 4th. But someone said, "Well, listen, if we do it on March 8th, they will not be. I don't think they will use power because it's a ladies' day." So this was kind of their assumption that they won't be beating people at that on March 8th. But of course, it was bad assumption as we know now.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, from your perspective, how the Jewish community is perceived now in Poland. I know that in 2018, there was this law about the Holocaust that was passed, and thinking about what was permissible to say in Poland about the Holocaust and World War II and what was not permissible. And so just any thoughts or reflections you have about the role and position of the Jewish community in Poland today.
Well, it's perhaps it's more complicated than I can say in few brief words, but there are books being published now in Poland about Holocaust, about what was happening during the war, and I can say still we have white spots on that subject, which hopefully they will be fulfilled in the nearest future. What are the reasons they are not so far? They are from both sides, I must say. Because there is no, I'm not in the middle of this kind of relation, but I feel that there is no will from both sides to cover these white spots for some reason, which I must say I don't understand so far. But basically, I mean, it's not like that the Jewish subject is forbidden and nothing is permissible. No, we can. I mean, it's a democratic country. At whatever we say, we can talk about Jewish problems, but of course, because there are groups of people who are against this law which has been established in our parliament. So there were always frictions, and I think there are many problems with that. Unfortunately, one of my friends who was I'm talking about Shevach Weiss, who recently died. He was a Polish ambassador, Jewish Israeli ambassador in Poland 4 times, and he was also a head of parliament in Israel. He was one of the Jews in Poland who was saved by Polish family in Boryslaw, which is now in Ukraine. And he had, I think, very well. He was my friend, and we spoke a long time about this relationship. And he always had a very, very, I would say, practical point of view, because he said, "Well, listen, we can always create problems, but from my life, from your life, I mean, we have to take things which are positive, and we can look forward, not." So this was his policy, and well, I liked him. He was like my uncle a bit. And I'm always trying to quote him regarding, relationship between Jews and Poles during a war and after the war. And it's very often when I was touring in the States with a film you have seen, sometimes I was asked the question, how is it possible that this film has been done in Poland? It looks like, like we are in Poland, which is grabbed by anti-Semites, and nothing is possible. It's not like that. I mean, there are groups of anti-Semites, like they are everywhere they are, but this film was offered by the Polish television. So, on the other hand, it looks strange, but it was a truth. So I'm not pretending to say you something which is not a truth. It's a truth. So long time to explain things, because if you live in Poland, I mean, my grandfather was a Jew, and my father was a Jew, and he survived war because he stayed to Soviet Union. Just before the war started, my grandfather, my grandmother, and my granduncle, they died in Auschwitz. Probably in Auschwitz, because we don't know, but they were sent to ghetto. And of course, they shared the fate of millions of Jews in Poland, and still, this anti-Semitic atmosphere sometimes appears. So this is the most strange, probably, thing, that you have anti-Semitism without Jews, because most of Jews, they were killed in Poland, and the feeling, towards them remained. So this is strange. Sometimes, but not everywhere. I can live here.
Okay. Well, yes, I have many more questions, especially after that personal history, but those questions will wait till we can hopefully meet in person. And if you ever come to Philadelphia, please be in touch with us. I am so grateful for your time and insights into this really spectacular movie. And thanks to PJFM for giving us the opportunity to talk and gain a little better understanding of your motivation and insights into this really important work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm really delighted that I had the opportunity to talk to such a pretty rabbi.
Thank you. Maybe you'll put me in your next movie.
Thank you.